These 5 national park disappearances defy all logic and explanation. The truth behind these missing persons cases is more terrifying than any horror movie. I'm exposing the one piece of evidence that changes everything. You have to stick around until the end because the final story will make you question if these woods are ever truly empty. Glenn Hyde and Bessie Hyde stood at the edge of the Colorado River with the cold November sun cutting sharp across the Grand Canyon walls. The sound of rushing rapids echoing like a warning that only the wilderness itself could voice. Glenn was ambitious, a farmer and craftsman with calloused hands that had built the very scow they trusted with their lives. A boat they had named Rain in the Face, as if a warrior's spirit would protect them. Beside him was Bessie, 22, slender, a poet with dreams of being more than a quiet voice lost to Idaho farmlands. She wanted her words remembered, and she wanted history to remember her as the first woman to traverse the Grand Canyon by river. The honeymoon should have been laughter and candlelight, but instead it was rapids, rocks, and a silent pact with danger. They loaded their craft with supplies and ignored the absence of life jackets, believing youth and determination would carry them. When Emery and Ellsworth Kolb took their photographs at Bright Angel Trail, the newlyweds seemed confident, though in the photographs Bessie's eyes told another story. Emily Kolb remembered the way Bessie leaned close, muttering almost as if to herself, "I wonder if I shall ever wear pretty shoes again." The words felt like an omen, whispered to the canyon itself. The days that followed twisted into silence. The Kolb brothers waited for the couple to return for their photographs. But weeks passed until December brought an unclaimed boat, discovered snagged on rocks. Rain in the Face was eerily intact, upright, loaded with supplies as if its owners had stepped out for a moment and simply vanished into thin air. Inside, the camera told its own story, the last frame proving the pair had reached River Mile 165. That was the end of the evidence, but the beginning of speculation. Some believed they drowned, swept away by hidden currents near Mile 232, their bodies swallowed by water as indifferent as stone. But the canyon whispered other stories. Years later, whispers rose around campfires of rafting trips in the 1970s. An elderly woman, face weathered but eyes sharp, leaned into the flames and told strangers she was Bessie Hyde. She claimed she had unalived Glenn, wounded him in fury at his abuse, and escaped the canyon to begin a new life. Those around her exchanged nervous glances, uncertain if this was confession or delusion. She looked like Bessie. She spoke like someone who had lived that terror, but proof dissolved into the night air like smoke. Decades after that, when a woman named Georgia Clark died in 1992, her home was opened and secrets spilled out. Among her belongings lay a birth certificate for Bessie DeRoss and a marriage certificate with the names Glenn and Bessie Hyde. Was Georgia in fact Bessie, who had remade herself after a violent rupture on the river? Historian Brad Dimmock dismissed it, insisting the photographs proved otherwise, but skeptics accused him of protecting his book sales, keeping mystery alive for profit. When skeletal remains with a bullet hole in the skull were unearthed near the Kolb property, hope flared that closure had come, but forensic science erased it. The skeleton was too young to be Glenn. The canyon swallowed the truth and refused to yield it, leaving Glenn and Bessie Hyde as shadows, their smiles frozen in photographs that never aged, their fate trapped forever between river and rock. Far north in Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park, another family's joy turned to horror in 1938. William Harvey Beilhartz, his wife, and their 11 children ventured into Estes Park for a simple holiday of fishing and walking. Little Alfred, only 4 years old, was there one moment and gone the next. His family called his name, their voices slicing through the trees, but the silence that returned was colder than the mountain air. Park rangers assumed he had slipped into the nearby creek and drowned, but dragging the waters brought no body, no clothes, no proof. Bloodhounds sniffed out trails, 150 men spread through the woods, and for 10 days they scoured the land. The mountains yielded nothing. Then came the sighting that haunts memory. 6 miles from where Alfred had vanished, a couple on a hike stopped in their tracks, eyes widening as they saw a boy clinging to a rock ledge in a place called Devil's Nest. Their hearts leapt, but before they could call out, a hand, or something resembling a hand, yanked the child back from sight. Shock and terror sent them running for help. When searchers arrived, ropes tied and climbing gear secured, they looked up at sheer cliffs so sharp and smooth it seemed absurd to imagine a 4-year-old scaling them. And when climbers risked the ascent, they found nothing. No boy, no footprints, no shred of clothing. The couple swore by what they had seen, but logic rebelled. A child could not have been there alone. If it was Alfred, then who or what pulled him from sight? Months later, when a ransom note arrived demanding $500 for Alfred's return, his family's flicker of hope curdled into despair. Police proved it a false information, a cruel twist. To this day, Alfred's father believed his son was abducted, snatched not by river or cliff but by human hands. The Devil's Nest still sits silent, its cliffs holding back whatever truth unfolded that summer. In Vermont, 1946 carried with it the frost of an early winter and the burden of a mystery that still lingers. Paula Jean Weldon was restless at Bennington College, weary from study, yearning for air that tasted of pine and mountain snow. She told her roommate Elizabeth she was finished with books for the day and needed a long walk. In her red parka and blue jeans, she set out alone on the long trail. Witnesses saw her hitch a ride, saw her walk into Bickford Hollow as daylight waned. A group of hikers warned her she was underdressed, that the temperature would plummet and snow was coming. Paula smiled, brushed them off, and walked into the woods. That was the last anyone saw of her. When she failed to return, Elizabeth reported her missing. By morning, the college called in the National Guard, firemen, students, anyone who could search the ridges. But no footprints led anywhere, no scrap of fabric snagged on bramble, no trace of her red coat against the white snow. Her father arrived, stern, impatient, and suspicious. At one point, he vanished for 36 hours himself, chasing a waitress's tip that Paula had been seen agitated in Massachusetts. When he reappeared, empty-handed, whispers spread that he knew more than he admitted. Theories pointed to her boyfriend, disapproved of by her father, others to Fred Gadet, a lumberjack whose story shifted until in drunken moments he told friends he knew where her body was. Yet no ground yielded bones. The Bennington Triangle absorbed her, as it had others between 1945 and 1950, an area where 5 vanished as if swallowed by the earth. The image of Paula in her red parka walking into the Glastonbury Mountains became a phantom sighting whispered by hikers for decades, her fate as elusive as mist that curls and fades with sunrise. Nevada's Mount Charleston cast its own shadow in 1966. 6-year-old Larry Jeffrey was playing with his brothers near the peak, their laughter cutting through pine trees. His father turned for a moment, and when he looked again, Larry was gone. Calls rang out, first light, then desperate, then hoarse with dread. Law enforcement moved quickly, assembling nearly 1,000 volunteers who combed the wilderness for 16 relentless days. The searchers found faint traces, insects disturbed as if picked over, berries missing from bushes, evidence suggesting the boy had survived for a time. Yet the nights were mercilessly cold, and Larry wore only light clothes. Hope dwindled with each passing dawn. No tracks suggested an animal harm, no signs pointed to abduction, yet no body was ever found. The silence of Mount Charleston settled like stone. Parents clutched their children tighter, and stories of Larry's disappearance became warnings whispered to anyone who wandered too far into the timberline. The wilderness offered no answers, only questions etched into the cold wind. And then, in Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains, came the disappearance that shook the nation. June 14, 1969, was meant to be a day of play. Dennis Martin, 6 years old, smiled as he darted behind a bush during a game of hide-and-seek with his brothers at Spence Field. His father watched him go, expecting the boy to leap out with a grin minutes later. The minutes passed, and Dennis did not return. Panic surged, his father running miles down the trail, calling his name until his throat burned. Evening fell, rain pounded the mountains, washing away trails, flooding streams, erasing footprints. The temperature dropped to near freezing. By morning, the search became the largest in park history. 1,400 volunteers trudged through mud and bramble, but their sheer numbers ruined clues, trampling what little evidence remained. Still, for a moment, hope flared. A footprint was found near a stream, small, barefoot, beside another matching the shoe Dennis wore. Soon after, a shoe and sock were discovered. Then nothing more. Dennis's father offered $5,000 for information, desperate to believe someone knew something. Years later, a ginseng hunter claimed he had stumbled across skeletal remains deep in Big Hollow, bones scattered but recognizable. He kept his secret until 1985, afraid he would be charged for trespassing or worse. When officials searched the place he described, they found nothing. The silence deepened into legend. But the most chilling account came from a man named Harold Key, who reported that on the day of Dennis's disappearance, he and his family had heard a scream, raw and piercing, tearing across the mountains. Soon after, they saw a figure, wild-haired, covered in dirt and possibly fur, carrying something red slung over its shoulder. Dennis had been wearing a red shirt. The FBI dismissed the sighting as unrelated, citing distance and lack of evidence. Yet locals whispered of abduction, or of something darker stalking the Smokies, something not quite human. Some called it Bigfoot, others a feral man, but no theory could heal the wound left in the Martin family. These disappearances bleed together like brushstrokes on a canvas of wilderness mystery. The Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, Vermont's Glastonbury Wilderness, Nevada's Timberline, and the Smokies, all places of beauty that also conceal the power to take without returning. So which theory do you believe is true? Was it something in the woods or something far more human? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The wilderness is hiding more secrets. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next.